The best part is the fact that this didn't turn into just another big company. You know, it remained with the culture that we started it with, and that's unusual. Ron and I founded the company, of course, and there were two of us, so we call ourselves co-founders. Tom Rock was an investor from the beginning. I first met Tom when I got out of college at the University of Iowa. Tom and Ron came down, and they had a big meeting up in the conference room, and the secretary came downstairs, and she was all excited, and she said, "They want you up in the conference room right away." And so that's how the three of us came together. It was really fate, you know, that happened. And Ron, Tom, and I each took a range of duties, and I was the guy that I did a lot of the traveling and doing the demonstrations and setting up the new plants and stuff. And Ron was a production guy, and he did a great job of that. And Tom, of course, being, you know, he was an MBA from Harvard and all that, but he was a brilliant guy. An engineer that I had, Dave Ongst, called me up, and he had left our company and for a better job in Philadelphia and making corrugated Teflon tubing. And they were making it in 2-foot lengths and splicing it together. And he said, "We're having a lot of trouble with this." And he said, "Do you think you could design a machine to make this make this corrugated tubing continuous?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll sketch something up and send it to you." When Tom told us that that division was going to be sold, then Ron and I started looking for something else. We figured we needed $15,000 apiece to start this thing. So my parents agreed to loan me $15,000. I called up Ron to see if he'd got his money, and he said, "Well, yeah," he said, "I can get the money," but he said, "I think there's something we ought to talk about." So I went over there, and he had this piece of tubing that was 2-inch. He said that Armco Steel had been trying to make this for 2 years. He said, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "My God," I said, I just put the design for the machine in the mail to Dave Ongst." So I called up Dave and I said, "You got to send those back to me." I said, I put them in the mail. You're going to get them in a day or two." And I said, "I can't tell you why, but just send them back to me." So that's really the way we came together and the way ADS started. Now then, we gathered up this money. We had $68,000, and I quit my job in April and hired Wayne Dunn. He was one of my better technicians at Celanese, and we had our pick of the people that were in my development group because it was being sold. Wayne and I always hit it off really well, and I had a lot of respect for him, and so he was the first one that came to work for us.
They said they're going to start a factory, so I started working for them because I was going to have a job after American Can purchased Celanese.
We leased this plant in Middletown, Delaware, and it was 40 by 90, and it had a 3-acre storage yard, and it had a truck dock. And so, but we had to put in all the wiring, and Ron and I did the wiring, and that's where we set up the first machine, and Wayne and I built a lot of the original machines that went into that. And I remember the cooling tank was made out of 3 55-gallon drums that we got out of the DuPont dump. And I welded those up, and I got sick from the fumes.
The biggest problem was keeping the stretch. And what you had to do, you had to sit on a stool at the end of the corrugator and watch the tubing go by, you know? And as you watch the corrugations go by, you know, and then you might nod off, you know, and so then you would hear your mistake down when it goes through the spray tank. It cools, then it went to the saw. Well, if the stretch wasn't right, the saw missed the valley of the corrugation hit on the top, and you would hear a distinct noise, So you would run down, and you'd pull on the pipe, get the stretch back in, go back up, sit down, and start watching the corrugations going by.
We suffered through, had a lot of fun doing it, but it took quite a bit of a lot of work and a lot of ingenuity, and Wayne had a big part of supplying a lot of the ideas.
Marty and Ron didn't know whether I could get a paycheck at the end of the week, okay? So they had set up an agreement with Celanese to convert material into smooth wall pipe. So we set up a second line in the plant to convert smooth wall pipe. Well, we had never made smooth wall. So we had an extruder, we had a vacuum tank and everything, and so we were worked, and we couldn't make the pipe. We couldn't make the pipe, So after a day of real frustration, Marty and Ron says, "We're going home. You do what you want." Well, they went home. We're running the 4-inch line, making pipe, tubing, and then I take a man and we go over to the smooth wall line, and just playing around, making adjustments and everything. Well, we made like 2 or 3 foot, and so I'd make another adjustment or whatever, and pretty soon, well, by morning, the line was running, and so Ron and Marty comes in, and they're happy, they're tickled to death. We're running pipe. What did you do? Then I told them that I had cut sections off the sizing die of the pipe. And they said, "Oh, no, we don't even own that. We just borrowed that. We don't even own it." I said, "We own it now," So we got that line running, and that kind of helped us out with the cash flow or whatever, But when we first started the line, we kept it running for about 3 days, and we stayed right there with the line because Marty needed to see the line run to be able to troubleshoot and evaluate some of the things that he wanted to do with it. So we just kept it running. We never went home. We just stayed right there. And when we first started out with it, we had like 50-pound bags of virgin material and some boxes of material that probably wasn't the cleanest of material that is on the market today. Plus, we did not have color concentrate in pellet form. We had powder carbon. And if you get it on your hands and wipe your face, you know that you've been around the carbon. Plus, it's a conductor of electricity, and we're shorting out receptacles and things of that nature. So it didn't take us long to get off of using carbon powder. We finally got carbon concentrate. And then we started making the pipe and kept that line running. We had an old style coiler, just a gigantic type of coiler, and we could make a coil on. And so we just started in production that way.
We got the thing going, and Willard Schaller, who was an investor, the man from Ohio that was the contractor, he wanted the first tubing, but we knew he wasn't going to pay for it, and we needed the money really bad by that time. I sold 2 truckloads to a golf course in Louisville, Kentucky, and I told them that if they wanted the tubing, that we'd have it shipped out by truck, and I needed them to send a check back with the truck driver.
One day, Marty comes to me. We had 52,000 feet of inventory in the lot. Well, today, 52,000 feet isn't much pipe, but at that time, it was a lot of pipe that wasn't selling. And at that time, Marty came to me, and he and Ron were going to make a tour out into Ohio or the Midwest to see about selling pipe. And I was directed to start laying some people off. We would work 1 12-hour shift a day. I had notified the employees that at the end of the week we were going to cut back and do the 12-hour shift. Well, that was on Monday. On Wednesday, Peg, which is the wife of Ron Martin, came to me. She says, "Don't lay anybody off. We're doing well. We're 20 car loads of pipe behind." Now, we were shipping in rail cars also, not only on trucks, but in rail cars. So from then on, we just kept running 24 hours a day, 5 days a week.
We went over to the, and I don't know if you were with me, but we went over to the rail station, and here was this chalk outline of a guy on the floor.
Body.
Yeah, and he died right there, and he was the guy that we made all the arrangements for. It was really a shock. He was gone, but they had a drawing of him on the floor. Pretty bad. Ron and I sat down and we decided what we're going to do because we're out of money. And I went down to the nearest place that we had inquiries was from North Carolina. And so I went down there and I put on demonstrations. I would go to the SCS office and show them the samples and the brochure that we made and told them all about that. And then I'd ask them, I said, who is your best contractor? And they said, well, so-and-so and so-and-so. And I said, would it be possible that we could go out and visit them? Sure. So I'd take brochures and the samples and we'd jump in their station wagon and go out and talk to the contractor.
It was a startup. I mean, money was always tight. We made do with a lot of things, fixed a lot of things ourselves. At that time, the corrugating process was European, and that's where the technology came from. And so Reifenhauser was, at that point, was one of the leaders in that industry, and that's the equipment that Marty and Ron chose to buy. And then we got to the point to where, after operating them, we saw some very significant weak points with the equipment. And then Marty, being the engineer that he is, took that corrugator apart. So we took it apart piece by piece. It was a Reifenhauser corrugator, so that Andy could draw it up and make a set of working drawings and build one of the first ADS corrugators, patterned quite closely to the Reifenhauser corrugator, but there were a lot of improvements that Marty had designed into some of the weak points that we had discovered by running them. And so that was the beginnings of the first ADS corrugator.
Tom came out one time to visit, and he said, well, when are you going to get that machine together and to make the big tubing and the big fittings and stuff? And I said, Tom, I just got to be honest with you. I don't know if I can get it done. You know, I got so much other stuff going on. And he said, let's call John Hodges. And I said, great. So we called John. It was in the evening. We called him at home, and we said we'd like you to come to work for us. And John never even asked what we were going to pay him. He said yes. He knew we'd be fair.
I was at a dinner one time, and he had got up and made a speech about what all I did. And this guy, lawyer, sitting beside of me, and he said, tell them the kind of education you have to have a job like that. And I said, you're not going to believe this. And he said, what? I quit school in the 7th grade. He said, don't tell them. Don't.
John and I a couple times went to Chicago. Remember that? Down in the bad part of town to these machinery dealers that had blow molding machines. And I remember the one time he was driving a Cadillac, I think, and he said, now you got to lock the doors from now on. We go through this bad part of town. And we look at these machines, and we had them shipped back, and this crew put them together, and that's how we started in the fitting business.
I started out in Malin, Ohio, and we had a 40 by 80 building there. And we had a little Sterling extruder and a small corrugator, S120. And then later on, we put in the second Reifenhauser line, another 4.5-inch extruder, and another corrugator. And about that time, Worcester was starting up, as well as the line from Middletown, Delaware, was moving to Iowa City. And so a lot of things were going on, and so I was involved in a lot of things there in Molina in the startup, and then as the company grew, I spent time in Arthur, Illinois with Wayne setting up a leach bed perforator. The first leach bed perforator was the old Sockets machine that I took my El Camino and went to New Jersey and picked it up and hauled it back to Molina to start making leach bed. And then I spent time up at the Owasso plant when that was starting up, helping get the equipment in, and was down in Roland, North Carolina on a couple different times working with them on startups.
I was always astounded when Harvey ran his plant, how well he knew everything that was going on. So he always said that things get done that you inspect, not expect. So he set the standards that we set as managers. A guy like Wayne out there on the floor with your guys, you're in a battle with them. If they have a problem, you take up slack for them and figure out what the problem is. So that's how we started. Marty and Ron and those guys never questioned the decisions we made. This is what we're trying to get to. You go do it. If the plants have a problem, as soon as they contact us, it's everybody's problem. We're on the same team. So that's why I always learned with Wayne. I don't care where he was at, where Harvey was at, where Mr. Six was at, where Dad was at. We were all one team.
I'm so proud of the way the employees carried on the company and in keeping the same culture that we of the employees coming first, and really that's really gratifying to me. And the best part is the fact that this didn't turn into just another big company. It remained with the culture that we started it with, and that's unusual. And that's why we sold it to the employees. We hoped that would be what happened, and it did. And so I'm very proud of everybody that is still working all those hours and doing all the things that need to be done, and I'm really gratified myself, to see this happen.